The Dallas Cowboys lost a key part of their defense in training camp.
The full terms of Tua Tagovailoa's 4-year, $212.4 million contract.
James Paxton is officially back with the Boston Red Sox to help this team.
Tyus Jones headed to the Valley.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The Dallas Cowboys lost a key part of their defense in training camp.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
Sam Williams, the Cowboys' third-year defensive end, who was expected to have a big role this season, tore his ACL. He will be out for the entire 2024 season. And this one's really tough because I know how excited Sam was for this year. This one's really it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean it's always tough, especially when they get hurt early in training camp and there's kind of before things even really get started, it feels like that the season's suddenly over. Even compared to last year where we had obviously several ACL injuries. A little bit further along. I mean, this is like, day 3 or something like that, or, it's
the pads haven't even come on yet.
Yeah. We haven't even had a padded practice yet. So to see Sam lose the season, so early in our time here in Oxnard is obviously frustrating. And it obviously opens up a lot of questions as to, how do the Cowboys deal with this and how do they, what's the next step? And, what even is the situation for, moving forward. But I think as it stands right now, it's more just kind of dealing with the fact that they've lost a player that they had a lot of expectations for, at least a lot of hope for, to be a major part of the defensive end rotation for the season. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's tough on a personal level, and I think we should start there with Sam Williams, who really wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think was really looking forward to the season.
Yeah, we'll talk about potential replacements and what the Cowboys are going to do, but for Sam, this is it's so tough, right? Because I think he believed that he was going to be in for a massive upgrade in his role. It seems like he had his body ready to go. Hopefully was over some of the maturity stuff that he had kind of bothering him, at Ole Miss and then early on in his career. I guess the only positive spin out of this is that it happened so early in training camp that you would expect that he would be 100% by this time next year, going into the final year of his rookie contract. But there's no way to really spin it. This is a good way. Good thing.
It's not much of a spin, it's still extremely unfortunate. Of course, you're right. Coming back into next year, it will give him an advantage just to someone who, tore an ACL, midway through the season. It's obviously better than that, but it's a very little silver lining in a very gray cloud at this point.
Yeah, and I should mention we are still waiting the official word. I know Tom Pelissaro from NFL Network reported that the Cowboys believe it's a torn ACL. It doesn't sound like it's anything more complicated than that. And we've seen in the past some of those ACL injuries that have other ligament damage. That's where you get into trouble. But as of right now, it sounds like it's an ACL tear only. Prayers up for Sam. That it's really tough. But moving forward, Lana, let's look at the Cowboys' defensive line depth. You have Micah Parsons. You have DeMarcus Lawrence. They drafted Marshawn Kneeland in round 2. Do you think they have enough depth currently on the roster at that position, or do you think they need to go out and sign somebody? Because if you look at where they were at compared to this time last year, you had Dante Fowler, you had Dorrance Armstrong, obviously you had Sam Williams. Do they need to go out and sign a veteran now?
I certainly wouldn't be shocked if they did. I think you're going to maybe give Golston a couple extra snaps out there. You're going to see what Fajoku can give you as a little bit of a defensive end, though he's been playing a lot of defensive tackle. It feels like mostly, I think there was a high probability that they were going to look at a veteran defensive end, maybe at the end of training camp, anyways, even if Sam was healthy, just to kind of have another body in this rotation. So that just moves that timeline up, I would say, a little bit. I think ultimately you're going to try to cobble this together with a combination of a veteran out on the street, maybe someone you could sign, and then, maybe someone you have internally that can kind of give you some extra pass rush snaps. I think maybe you just are going to, rely a little bit more on Marshall Nealand than you expected. But I think that certainly is the case at this point, regardless. But I think that a veteran signing is probably likely at this point, and was probably likely even if Sam didn't get hurt, honestly.
I just don't know when it's coming, because I could see the Cowboys wanting to give all of these young players as many snaps and reps as possible in training camp to just try to see where their depth is at, and then go out and sign a Carl Lawson or a Yannick Ngakoue or whoever, like name the guy. But I could also see them just looking at their numbers at the defensive end position. And because you have DeMarcus Lawrence, who's older, you don't want to overwork him in training camp. And because you have Micah Parsons, who's playing some linebacker, he's down to 240 pounds. Maybe that need is right now. You don't want to wait for another team to potentially scoop up the guy that you're trying to sign.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know that a lot of these guys are, going to be flying off the board, as it stands right now. This is kind of a good time probably to be having to do this, because everyone is in a very similar mode, right? To kind of see what they've got at this point. And the only people that are potentially shopping for veteran defensive ends are people that are dealing with unfortunate situations like this, right? So I think that, the good news is that there are some names out on the street that are decent. And I think that, when we're talking about the scope of what Sam Williams' responsibilities were on this team, I think that the veterans that you sign off the street could probably handle that situation in combination with the guys you have on the roster. But either way, it's obviously not ideal. You had more hope for Sam Williams to be an exceptional player, not just a third defensive end rotational guy, a guy that you actually wanted to feature. There was that hope going into the season. And so obviously now you're just hoping to get, somewhere close to Sam Williams level replacement, production from whoever you sign.
The hardest part of this is you look at their current roster of pass rushers, right? Between DeMarcus Lawrence, Marshall Nealand, Junior Fajoku, Chauncey Golston, Tyrus Wheat, if you want to count him, like those are all bigger power rushers. Outside of Micah Parsons, like they just don't have a lot of juice. Like, who is the guy that's going to run the arc and dip underneath the tackle and make a play? Or who's the guy that's just going to convert the speed to power and bulldoze a tackle back into the quarterback? Like I don't want to say they don't have athletes outside of Parsons, but like, who's the guy that has any juice in this pass rush right now?
Well, I mean, the good news there is that you're dealing with Mike Zimmer, who's kind of used to, not having to have this. He's used the bigger defensive ends a little bit. So, you're not wrong. Absolutely. And I think that as far as like absolute speed pass rushers, it's not a very deep bench outside of Micah Parsons. But I also think that, based on what I saw in practice today, from Zimmer, there's going to be guys coming from all kinds of different directions. They're going to be able to get people to the quarterback without having to just rush forward. So I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is that the need of having the huge deep bench of endless pass rushers, because you're specifically rushing 4 and dropping 7 each time, I think is going to be mitigated a lot by the things that Zimmer is going to be doing. So maybe you also get some relief from Zimmer X's and O's here a little bit as well.
It's a big bummer. I feel terrible for Sam. But the Cowboys, the only positive thing here is that it happened now rather than like in week 1 or a couple of weeks before week 1. That gives you a little bit more time to come up with a contingency plan here for Sam Williams. But nothing else good about this situation at all.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel Golf, America's #1 sports book. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. With the moves that have happened so far, FanDuel believes that the NL Championship Series could possibly be the actual World Series this year. The Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series. FanDuel has them at plus 320. The Phillies right behind them at plus 460. The Yankees are the favorite AL team, plus 550, followed closely by their division rival, Orioles. No, they can't win the pennant. They can't win the title. They can't win the World Series. Plus 650. What are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast.
Stacey, I know this one hits at the heartstrings because your boy Jared Serna was traded. But I do want to break down the Jazz Chisholm trade. Again, as I mentioned in the first segment, I love them. I love this trade being the first one they make of the deadline because it's not a I guess, quote unquote, banger kind of move where it's this top tier player that you think, all right, this is all they need and they're all in. It's a move where it's a really good depth piece. It's a really nice player, but it also shows this is nowhere near a move that they're done with. And it makes me feel like this is the first of many, which gives me a lot of confidence as a Yankee fan. I want to hear from you first on how you feel about the trade, how he fits, and then we'll get into the return.
I like that he plays multiple positions because they need guys to play multiple positions. Yeah. It was rumored for a few days and, there were stories coming out like, the Yankees aren't sure because how is he going to fit in the clubhouse? And I was just like, who is saying this stuff? Like, it's so annoying. I can't stand articles like that because the Yankees have had other guys who you don't think are going to fit in the clubhouse and they're perfectly fine. Yeah. Like, really, it's not like the days of Reggie Jackson with the straw that stirs the drink and pissing everyone off in the dugout. Like, we haven't really had someone like that in a really long time. Like, as much as people always were on A-Rod, his teammates loved him. And, so that's just always so silly to me. But I like this move. I'm a little bummed about both Agustin Ramirez and Jared Serna. Serna was my boy. That was my one, because I was finally like getting into knowing prospects and knowing names, and I'd keep up with him at Hudson Valley and get all excited when he did things. And, he probably will have a better time getting through the Marlins system than he would the Yankee system. So this is a good opportunity for him. And it's a good opportunity also for Agustin Ramirez.
He did have Agustin Ramirez really good numbers this year, but when it comes to rankings, all these guys were lower ranked prospects in the Yankees overall system, right? Which gives you a little better hope. It's like people like us who watch the show consistently every single day, and us who cover the team every single day. We know how good these guys actually are, but they are lower ranked prospects in the whole system, which gives you a little more confidence when it comes to it. It is a little bit to give up, but Jazz Chisholm is an above average major leaguer, which if you guys have been watching, the Yankees have only had 2 of them in their lineup all year.
Until this weekend.
Until this weekend, exactly. Yeah. So, he's played really well this year. He's been an above average player this year. His OPS is about 100 points above an average player in the whole league, which is, again, exactly what they need to plug into the middle of the lineup. And I think they know they're not one above average player away from being an awesome team that's so much better, right? They know they need more than that. So I think that does help them also. A 249 batting average, a 323 on base. He has 13 home runs, although there was a stat out there that if all of his home games were played at Yankee Stadium instead of Marlins Stadium or Marlins Park, he would have 19 home runs this year instead of 13. So you are getting a little more of that lefty bat. He does have a tendency to pull the ball a lot, so that short porch could be a really good benefit to him. He's also really fast on the bases, and he likes to create havoc on the bases. And he's very well aware. You did see late in the game today, or last night, the stolen base at the third base, where he noticed that Devers was not paying attention, and he went ahead and took third base. That's a really positive sign if you're a Yankee fan, because have we seen that level of awareness from any other player on the team this year?
Not really.
No. And he went out there and he took third base. Devers wasn't covering, and he you need that on the bases. It's not just that move, taking third base and being on third base. Yeah, that's great, and we can acknowledge that. What really is great about a move like that is the fact that you're creating chaos. You're creating things on the base path, because later on in that inning, there was the error. Devers made the error at third base. You create more chaos. You create more noise. You create more things going on. That's how you manufacture runs out of nothing. And the Yankees have had trouble doing that all year. Also, this crazy stat, Stacey, that I don't know if any Yankee fans out there realize. Jazz Chisholm has only grounded out into 11 double plays in his entire career. Not this year. His entire career. And that's extremely beneficial, because it feels like all the Yankees do is ground out to double plays. So you're getting a guy that doesn't really ground out double plays. I don't hate batting him fifth either. I think it was all really a consensus that he would bat first. I don't hate him batting fifth at all. I feel like a guy in the middle of the lap, he's going to get on base, and at bare minimum, he's only going to cause one out there. I don't hate that move either.
Yeah, that wasn't, that lineup wasn't anything terrible when it went out. I was like, all right, this is interesting. And hey, it worked because they scored 8 runs. So that's always a good thing. He does have some injury concerns. He played a career high of 124 in 2021. But since then, in order, 60 games in 2022, 97 in 2023. And so far, he's appeared in 102 games this season because we have to add that number because of Sunday night. He was an all-star in 2022, and then he got hurt. Like we said, Boone had told reporters that he would like to see him take grounders at third just to test things out. And I think Oswaldo Cabrera took that personally.
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to end up doing that. It feels like a position like he doesn't play third base a lot. He's not been there a lot in his career. And, you can move guys around at first base in the outfield. Third base is a position that's really hard to just plug someone into that hasn't played there a lot. A lot of hot balls hit off third base. That's not a position. I think there's going to be a move for a third baseman, to be quite honest with you. That's what it feels like.
I think so too. I think maybe they're saying that to not make Gleyber feel like he's going anywhere because Jazz plays second base. So also, the third base thing, A-Rod comes in. I'll play third. And who works with him? Greg Nettles, one of the best defensive third basemen ever on planet Earth, helped A-Rod out. And A-Rod was pretty good at third base.
A-Rod's also a top 10 player in the history of the sport. So it's kind of hard to use that as a...
No, but the point was Greg Nettles had to come in and help him do that. Yeah. He didn't just come in and say, I'll play third base. Because remember when he tried to play first base, how horrifically bad that was? So, yeah.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a move coming with Gleyber involved in it. I just feel like it's time to move on from him, and it might be a good move for them to make. And then you move Jazz over to second, especially because of the fact that they're really he's got team control. I mean, Jazz Chisholm is under control for the next 2 years after this. So you're talking 2025 and 26 at really cheap salaries. I think that's a real reason to keep him. Which means they're gonna this move solidifies they're not re-signing Gleyber after this year, which I think they kind of have made their mind up already. So why not move him and make a position player available? I do feel like there's a really good chance too that they make a move for a third baseman and they move on from DJ.
Breaking news out of the Chicago Cubs. They have traded Christopher Morel, Hunter Biggie, pitching prospect Ty Johnson for Tampa Bay Rays third baseman Isaac Paredes in a deal that I did not see coming. I thought there would be no way the Cubs would trade Christopher Morel at his absolute lowest value. There's so much to unpack here. This is just going to be a very brief 10 to 15 minute recap, and then Matt and I will get to it all tonight when we do our regular trade. Let's start with the main pieces of the deal. These are two players that are the exact opposite of each other. One player, Christopher Morel, is underlying stats. The numbers aren't great, but he projects out the expected batting average, the expected slug, all these things. But he is, not producing. Whereas Isaac Paredes is a guy that has been producing, but when you look under the hood, his expected numbers aren't great. So it's a very fascinating trade and one that I, did not see coming. I'll start with this. I want to read this tweet from Jeff Passan, because I think a lot of people are going to jump into the Cubs now. Oh, well, the Cubs are buyers. I'm not sure that's the case just yet. Here's the quote from Passan in the tweet. Just because the Cubs are considering moving players from this current roster doesn't mean they're selling. Just as because they acquired Isaac Paredes doesn't mean they're buying. Modern baseball is a game about opportunity. The furthest thing from a binary. It is a fundamental tenet to understand how teams operate and what motivates them. There can be buyers and sellers, yes, but ultimately teams view themselves as value gatherers. And the only question is whether they're gathering that value for today or down the road. And I think Jed really believes that this is going to help them. Isaac Paredes is under control through 2027, basically the same as Christopher Morel. And I think this is Jed Hoyer getting a jump start on trying to really focus more on production as opposed to expected production, and to fill a hole for next year. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this, filling a hole at a cost that doesn't cost a lot because they're very aware of their cost and their situation. I'm not a huge fan having to give up Hunter Biggie in this deal because you just know in a couple of years he will be dominating with the Tampa Bay Rays. You just know that. But here's Isaac Paredes' numbers this year. He's hitting .247, a very solid on base, a .355, a nice slug of .438, and an OPS of .793. He's been worth 2.5 wins above replacement. He's pretty solid over at the third base position. I'm struggling to put into words what I think this is. I could already see in the chat. I really would caution people thinking to themselves that, oh, well, the Cubs are going for it now. I don't think that's the case for this season. I don't believe that. My initial take is that the Cubs felt like Isaac Paredes makes them better right now and going forward. This team doesn't have the luxury. We've talked about it on the show. They have too many question marks heading into 2025. And I think this was a way that Jed Hoyer was able to answer one of those question marks. Christopher Morel was going to be a question mark heading into this year. Isaac Paredes is a guy that has a lot more of a proven success track record. So you go in knowing what you're getting with him and from him and eliminating that question mark with Christopher Morel. Now, if you're a big analytics guy, if you're a guy that really likes to look under the hood, you have concerns about Isaac Paredes. The first thing that you look at is you say to yourself, man, his baseball savant numbers are dangerous. They don't look sustainable. But then again, Christopher Morel, like I said, is the exact opposite. And he's supposed to be better than he is right now. And he's not. So I think Jed went the production route this time instead of the expected route. I'll be genuinely honest with you. I did not think they'd give up on Christopher Morel this early. They put so much emphasis and so much hope in him. He was batting fourth the beginning of this season. He was playing third base. And now the Cubs have traded him. And it frustrates me in a sense that the Cubs went that far to gamble with him, because obviously if they're giving up on him now, their hopes for him were not as high as they made it seem. And I go back to this season and think about the now, and I just wish the Cubs didn't, put so much into Morel, because he's really a big reason why they're struggling. My initial thoughts on the trade, people are asking, do you think the Cubs got fleeced? It's hard to answer. The answer is no, but it all depends on Christopher Morel. If Christopher Morel turns into Kyle Schwarber with the Nationals and the Phillies, and Isaac Paredes is just an average player, then sure. But I think you have to look at this trade. My initial thoughts looking at this trade are not really about the pieces, but about the statement that it makes. And I think the statement that it makes is that, number one, Jed Hoyer is going to be in charge this offseason, or else he's not making a deal like this. This is a deal about 2025 and beyond. I think that Jed Hoyer is admitting that this team obviously has tons of holes, and they're looking for a more steady, more consistent bat. And so now we have a third baseman next year. That's checked off the list. Is it a superstar third baseman? No. But is it a guy that made the All-Star game? Yes. So it's a very complicated deal to evaluate. My biggest thing out of this live would be, I don't think this makes the Cubs buyers. They're currently losing 3-2 in Kansas City. They're 5.5 games out of a playoff spot. I think this is a move about feeling good going into 2025 and eliminating some holes. And I was talking about it with a lot of people the other day. Like, what do the Cubs do next year? Where are they really feeling great? You know what I mean? You're locked in at shortstop. You don't feel great about that. You're locked in at the corner outfielders. Those guys have produced, but you don't feel great about that. And now if you have Morel, he locks up a DH spot, potentially third base. So this gives him a lot more flexibility and a more steady guy. Let's dig in real briefly to Paredes' numbers here. Last year with Tampa, he was outstanding. He batted .250 with a .352 on base, .488 slug. He had an .840 OPS. So I think it's safe to say that he is somebody that's probably going to outperform his metrics, outperform the baseball savant page. He's somebody that in his big league career has a 772 OPS. And if you take away his first 2 years with Detroit as a Tampa Bay Ray, he's just been stellar with an OPS hovering around 800 in his career there. I'll be genuinely honest with you. I'm not overly familiar with his defense. I'm taking a look at it right now. He's played 77 games at third base. The numbers look decent over there. They look fine. We've talked about how Christopher Morel is really bad over there. But look, there's a lot. There's a lot here. I thought the Cubs were going to give Christopher Morel another 2 months to really prove himself, maybe elevate his trade deadline. This is the type of trade I would have expected the Cubs to make in the offseason, not at the trade deadline, because the Cubs have man on second, nobody out. How did that happen? Sorry, I got sidetracked. Oh, wow. Betancourt with a double. Somebody said the chat room's empty. No, we got 480 people here. I thought they would give Christopher. This is a trade. If I had asked Jed about this trade, my initial question would be, why now? When both teams are not in a sell now, buy now situation. Why now? And I'm guessing, like Jeff Passan said, there was an opportunity to pounce. Both teams wanted to do this. I totally see this from the Rays perspective. I mean, the Rays are going to, hey, we got a guy that has 40 home run potential. We got a reliever we really like. We don't have to pay either of them. Yay, yay, yay. But as far as the Cubs go, my initial conclusion is that the Cubs really want to steady that third base position, feel really good about it. Now, this way, they don't have to rush Matt Shaw up. They have a guy that could play there every day. He's a lefty masher. He's been pretty consistent the last 2 years. He made the All-Star team. And you have somebody that you could put in the middle of the lineup that's solid. It's another very nice player. We know that it's, not a star, but the Cubs have a lot of holes. They have a hole at third. They have holes at catcher. They have holes in the outfield if they trade Bellinger and PCA doesn't start to hit. And, they need to start filling them. And so maybe this was a step towards doing so.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and even easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
The full terms of Tua Tagovailoa's 4-year, $212.4 million contract.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast.
So let's jump right back into it with this contract. Finish the structure of the full term of the contract and go from there. The next chapter, we are through the fully guaranteed and guaranteed at signing dollars. There is some conditional guarantees for 2027, but the year one and year two money is fully guaranteed with the exception of the performance incentives. That's $1 million a piece, starting in 2025 as far as how many games you play, you show up for your workouts, so on and so forth. 2026 salary, that $54 million salary for 2026, that guarantees next March in 2025, a year in advance. 2027 has money that is guaranteed for injury, but it also has $3 million that fully guarantees in 2026, March of 2026. Why did the Dolphins do that? This is where the cash flow dramatically changes. You have Tua on board for $43 million in cash. You have him on board for potentially $51 million in cash. You have him on board for $54 million in cash. 2027, the cash dips below $40 million. Tua himself he's got a $31 million salary that is due that year. $3 million of that guarantees in March of 2026. So if Tua makes it to the 2026 season, $3 million of this $31 million salary will guarantee. He will also carry the fourth of the 5 years of the prorated signing bonus in 2027. There is currently no scheduled proration of the 2025 money, but he is due for a $5 million roster bonus that is due to him. It's not guaranteed, but it's an additional $5 million that he can collect if he is on the roster at the start of 2027. Usually some date within the first week of the league calendar year is when a check like that needs to be cut. So the Dolphins have an opportunity in this window, assuming they don't do other funny money stuff with the contract, which I have to imagine 2025 will have some level of restructure. It's just a question of how much, right? This is where the guaranteed money runs out. The rest of the salary, or the rest of the $20 million that has any kind of conditions to this, guarantees in March of 2027. So there's a big decision at the start of the league calendar year in 2027 that you're looking at a $5 million roster bonus and $17 million in salary that guarantees versus just $3 million that guarantees the previous year. You could see the cap hit as a result because the cash is significantly lower. It's a $45.4 million scheduled cap commitment with a cash flow that potentially sits between $1 million in performance incentives, a $5 million roster bonus, and then the $31 million base salary that's due. You're looking at a grand total of $37 million in cash flow that year versus these other years are mid 40s and up. This is a notable turning point in this contract where decisions can be made. If things are going good, this is probably the point where Tua says, hey, I've been getting a certain price point the last couple of years, and now I'm scheduled to make under $40 million with presumably the salary cap that's continuing to skyrocket. I'd love to get that readjusted. Why don't we negotiate that? That'll be his age 28 season in which this year comes into play. Then in 2028, there's not a lot of fluff attached to this. It's $41,400,000 in non-guaranteed salary. There's no guarantees attached to it, and then an additional $7 million roster bonus that is due at some point in that season. So there's roster bonuses, there's signing bonuses, there's guaranteed salary, there's non-guaranteed salary, there's salary that's guaranteed for injury, there's vested money that guarantees at a later date that gets rolled into your practical guarantees. But you take everything here, the base salaries of $1.1 million, $25 million, $54 million, $31 million, $41.4 million. You take the signing bonus of $42. You take the roster bonus in 2025 of $25 million. You got the roster bonuses in 27 and 28 that are not guaranteed. And then you take the $1 million performance incentives for 25, 26, 27, and 28, and you get a grand total of $235,571,000. That is the total of the contract. That is all the money. The salary cap hits out of this, as it is currently scheduled, $9.525 million in 2024, nearly $60 million charge in 2025. But there's about $51 million of that is fluid, that you could save about $40 million against the cap with whatever you choose to do with that contract in 2025. If you want to move the maximum amount of money that you possibly can, you can create $40 million in cap space with a maximum restructure of Tua's contract in next March. The best thing that could happen for the Dolphins from a salary cap perspective, Tua blows this year out of the water, and it becomes a no-brainer to say, well, we'll take all the cap space from this contract that we can get. We have even more confidence in who you are as a player. There is a cap charge in 2026 as currently stands of $63.4 million. A cap charge of $45.4 million in 2027, and then a $57.8 million cap charge in 2028. But again, reminder, the only prorated money right now is the $42 million. So when you get through 2025 and 2024, and you start the 2026 calendar year and league year, if you don't do anything with Tua's contract next offseason, you're talking, you have less than $26 million in potential dead money in outs of that contract, depending on what you choose to do with it. This is an extremely, extremely fluid contract, especially relative to the terms that you would expect. And it's by design that they can take information as it comes while simultaneously ensuring that they have a contract in place with the player to ensure that the player's attention is focused on the right thing, which is football. And Spot Rack made a great point as they did a whole summary of this contract. And they said that the 3-year cash flow of this contract is about $34 million more than what a 5th-year option and consecutive franchise tags would be. So for the price of $34 million over 3 seasons, is that worth it to have Tua have the confidence of a deal in place and to have maximum cap flexibility at your disposal as far as how to create space as compared to if it's the franchise tag, just like it's just the 5th-year option, you can't do anything with it against the cap. That's the price that they paid from now through 2026 in that regard. And you could get to 2027, pay the $3 million as far as it's effectively a buyout. And you're looking at, I think I have these numbers. Make sure I have it right. You could ultimately end up having, if you moved on in 2027 as a post-June 1st cut, you could save about $10 million in 2027 against what you're currently scheduled for, and then you can save about $12 million in 2028 versus what you're currently scheduled for. So you have these 3 seasons, and that's after you do the maximum restructures in 2025 and 2026. So if you take the best case scenario for the next 3 seasons, and then the Dolphins want to go a different direction once all the guaranteed money runs out, they can still save $10+ million against the cap in each of 2027 and 2028. I'm letting this hang for a reason. I'll let that sink in. I know this is a lot of numbers. I know this is a lot of information. I know we're drinking through the fire hose right now. But as you get these full terms and you sit down and you look at this and you say, okay, here's the wins for Tua. Okay, here's the wins for the Dolphins. The Dolphins kind of have a firm commitment for 3 seasons in which logic is going to dictate unless something dramatic comes along as far as a dramatic shift or change of direction that's just too good to be true. With how it's structured, they're at least in place to take it. But logic would dictate 2024, 2025, and 2026 are years in which Tua Tagovailoa is going to be the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And then in 2027, that's kind of when that next fork in the road with decisions is going to come. And I don't think it's necessarily coincidence that that coincides 2026, right? It's when Tyreek Hill's contract currently is set to expire. Now, we'll see if they end up doing something with that deal or not. But the next 3 years nucleus of this team, kind of phasing guys into big contracts, phasing guys out of big contracts, locking guys up long-term that were part of your draft. That's kind of where we're at within this life cycle of the Dolphins. This competitive window with probably this ideology that you saw this offseason for Miami, I would assume will continue through 2026. And they'll try to put the best roster around their pillar players that they possibly can. And they are continuing to identify who those pillar players are. Tua Tagovailoa is now amongst them with a contract extension. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, breaking down the Dolphins contract with Tua with the full details courtesy of a report from Pro Football Talk. Also, Spot Rack chipping in with putting it all together. My own individual interpretation of that as far as a spreadsheet with colors, pretty colors, automatic populating cells that calculate the numbers as you put it in, all that stuff. But this one's in the books, right? And for $235 million across 5 seasons, the exchange of that for Miami, when you really sit down, you want to boil it down to a very simplistic exchange is how long did Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins sign for, and what dollar amounts did they sign for? Because Christian Wilkins signed 4 years, $110 million. Robert Hunt signed 5 years for $100 million. So that's 210 versus a $212 million contract for Tua. That's the exchange that took place. If you want to just have basic math. I'm not a math guy, but I can do that. The last thing, the performance incentives, not the workout bonuses and the per game active bonuses. There are bonuses attached to this that required Tua to play at least 50% of the snaps in any given season. And then it's tiered. Every postseason win that you log, there's a 6-figure bonus that's attached to. And that goes all the way up to if you play 50% of the snaps in the season and you win the Super Bowl, there's an extra $1 million available to you. Let's hope we get that. Let's cash that one in and then worry about what that does to the salary cap, right?
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, the Olympics, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel Golf, America's #1 sports book. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. With the moves that have happened so far, FanDuel believes that the NL Championship Series could possibly be the actual World Series this year. The Dodgers are the favorites to win the World Series. FanDuel has them at plus 320. The Phillies right behind them at plus 460. The Yankees are the favorite AL team, plus 550, followed closely by their division rival, Orioles. No, they can't win the pennant. They can't win the title. They can't win the World Series. Plus 650. What are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
James Paxton is officially back with the Boston Red Sox to help this team.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast.
Craig Breslow, towards the end of last week, finally picked a lane and said that the Red Sox are going to be improving the team at the trade deadline. So far, he has been making some additions, with the biggest one being adding James Paxton back to this rotation. They acquired him in a trade with the Dodgers for infielder Moises Bolivar. He was a minor league infielder, 17 years old, hit .270 with 3 home runs and 19 RBIs with the Dominican Summer League Red Sox. He agreed to a minor league contract with the team in January for a $25,000 signing bonus. So he is not a major piece or anything like that, was not an impactful player that the Red Sox really needed in the organization down the road, especially with the depth that they do have in the system right now. So they didn't really need him anymore. And the price was never going to be that high for James Paxton because he had been DFA'd by the Dodgers. So I wasn't expecting him to be super expensive, but I did go on record on the show last week and explain that Paxton would be a good fit and makes sense to bring back to Boston. He did pitch well in his start against the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball with the Dodgers, and it definitely creates some promise and some more depth for this rotation. This season, he is 8-2 with a 4.43 ERA over 18 starts. So he hasn't been fantastic per se this season, but he is a back-end starter who can eat innings, which is exactly what the Red Sox need. And from a depth standpoint, it now allows the Red Sox to utilize Cooper Criswell in the bullpen, which they did on Sunday night against the Yankees. And being able to shift him back into the pen with the injuries they have there, hopefully just allows for a much better setup for the Red Sox when it comes to bringing guys in relief. So James Paxton is somebody who the Red Sox have now brought in to hopefully provide some innings late in the rotation, and they don't necessarily need a front end starter. I mean, getting another rotation arm would be fantastic. It's something that I would love to see them do, but they do have a guy in Tanner Houck who has been very good this season. Did not look great last night against the Yankees, but overall has been that go-to guy for the Red Sox rotation this season. And then Cutter Crawford shortly behind him as the number 2 starter. So if they can get a solid starter to add to that group, that would certainly be ideal. But just adding a guy like Paxton, who is a veteran, has experience, and pitched in Boston, so he knows what that's like, could definitely help this team out a lot moving forward when it comes to trying to make a playoff run. And it just made a lot of sense bringing him back here as somebody who just has been with quite a few different teams and understands the pressure that comes with pitching in the postseason. So I'm definitely looking forward to having Paxton here. He's not going to be fantastic. I'm not expecting just this crazy good stuff from him. He might surprise us and have more starts like he did with the Dodgers against the Red Sox on Sunday Night Baseball, but I don't have high expectations for that. And I feel like he will simply serve as a lower back end starter who can just provide some rest for the bullpen by having a sense of eating innings and being able to go 6 or 7 innings per start, which would be absolutely ideal. The Red Sox DFA'd pitcher Chase Anderson, who was seriously struggling this year. And it was tough because he definitely had created a role for himself on this team. He was the guy that the Red Sox would throw in there to pitch when the game was over, whether the Red Sox were up by a lot of runs and they could afford to give up a few, so they would throw him in, or if they were down by a lot of runs and Alex Cora knew that the game was over, he was the guy that they could bring in those scenarios to eat innings at the end of games. So that was a defined role for him. So it's going to be tough not having our go-to guy in games that are a wash anymore, but it needed to happen. I mean, Chase Anderson was not getting the job done. And if the Red Sox are looking to improve and make a playoff run, they need to start to weed out the weaker links. And so it makes sense that they would DFA him because he was the weakest link in the bullpen. And I'm glad that the Red Sox are aware of that. And while making these bullpen moves, they also claimed right-handed pitcher Yohan Ramirez off of waivers from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I mean, talk about just the Red Sox and Dodgers just continuing to trade players and do business together. I mean, the history between these two teams is actually crazy, but there's lots of players going back and forth between these two teams. So the Red Sox claimed Yohan Ramirez off waivers. He was actually the second pitcher in 3 days who was DFA'd by the Dodgers to end up with the Red Sox because of James Paxton coming a couple days before that. So it's just ironic. But what's concerning about Ramirez is This is the 4th team this season for him. He also pitched for the Orioles and Mets before joining the Dodgers. In 2+ months with Los Angeles, he pitched in 27 of 54 games before they DFA'd him to make room for Clayton Kershaw. But on the season, he has a 5.97 ERA over 32 games, with 38 strikeouts and 15 walks in 37 2/3 innings. He's also 0-5, including 3 walk-off losses. So it's definitely a little bit concerning. He's not somebody who I have tons of high expectations for. I don't think the Red Sox do either. But Craig Breslow, to me, did this in the interim while he works to get a better reliever over the next couple of days before the trade deadline, because this to me screams this bullpen needs help right now. And maybe he'll be able to provide a little bit better value than Chase Anderson did. So we can have him in here for now. And then if I'm able to trade for a bigger, better reliever, then he either gets DFA'd again or maybe just gets sent down to AAA. So I'm not really seeing this guy as a permanent solution to the bullpen problem right now, nor do I think he is the only move they are going to make. But it is another pitching move that the Red Sox made that is worth noting. And he's somebody who hopefully is going to be able to go out there and surprise people a little bit and be able to just provide some innings late in games, because guys like Greg Weisser and Zach Kelly and Cam Boozer, those types of guys are going to start to get worn out because of how much they are being used. And it's really crucial to keep these guys rested, because we saw this last year with the Red Sox, how the bullpen just got super fatigued by the end of the season. So it's so important to make sure that these guys are still in check and on par with being able to give their best performances. So in order to be able to have them do that, with the combination of Cooper Criswell getting sent back into the bullpen, allowing for James Paxton to come in, and picking up Ramirez, hopefully will just give the Red Sox a little bit more breathing room now that Chase Anderson has been replaced by Ramirez. So lots of moving parts.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and even easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Tyus Jones headed to the Valley.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast.
This is a no-brainer signing. When a player this talented wants to be here on a minimum contract, you do what you need to do to make that happen. Even if other plans might have felt like this thing was headed in a different direction, or you kind of have some players who overlap with him, he's too good to say no to. It also gives them the flexibility to continue to shape this thing closer to what they want it to be. But the reason that I'm wrong is because I did an episode earlier this week where I went through and I said, is there anybody on the market that the Suns could get that would be worth cutting a player already on their roster for? And the guy that I focused first and foremost on was David Roddy as the cuttee in that situation. And I said no. I said there's nobody, because I frankly just did not think that the combination of a small salary and a small role was going to be enough to convince anybody. And if you were down to a lower tier of player that might take a minimum and might take a smaller role, well, it's just not worth eating the contract and cutting Roddy and going through all of that to get somebody who's a question mark. Tyus Jones is not a question mark. Tyus Jones was somebody I mentioned on that podcast. But I said, hey, even the Wizards, which is obviously his team last year, they are good enough where they're good enough where it's not a terrible opportunity for him. And they have the financial flexibility where they can pay him more than a minimum to keep him as their starting center, and then maybe he hits free agency again next year or something like that. But I just didn't see why he would want to leave that possibility. Turns out he had offers from Atlanta and Memphis and maybe Washington, according to John Gambadoro of Arizona Sports, but he chose to come here. And the reason that he chose to come here is because the role is not, in fact, small for him. And in a statement that he released by way of his agency, and then Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted it when he broke the news of the deal, he's going to be the starting point guard here. So after a year plus, all the way back to when Chris Paul got traded for Bradley Beal in June of 2023, where we have all been debating and arguing about whether, in fact, the Suns needed a starting point guard, whether it made sense, whether they could find one, they've done it. They now have one, and he is Tyus Jones. So I'm wrong that the Suns weren't going to be able to make an offer that was appealing enough to go get a player like that. And Roddy was, in fact, cut, although he was really traded to Atlanta, not cut directly, and now they will cut E.J. Liddell. If you can get an E.J. Liddell Suns jersey, though, I recommend doing it. They traded Roddy to Atlanta for this guy, Liddell, on Friday. He makes less money, so the cap hit of cutting him outright is a little bit cheaper than doing that with Roddy. And then also you clear that roster spot when you do cut Liddell and now have that space to go out and sign Tyus Jones. So they made a pitch. Tyus Jones sees this, as he said, not only as a starting role and a good opportunity to be a big part of a contending team, but also he made no bones about it, right? He is hoping to hit free agency once again next summer. So it makes sense from both sides. This was if you look at Atlanta, where, he would be backing up Trae Young on a team that's not going to be that good, or Memphis, where he would go back, where he just spent 4 years previous to this past season. He's going to be backing up John Morant again, and he got out of that situation. I mean, he got traded, but he wanted to prove he could be a starter, and on that team, he's going to be playing minimal minutes and not giving himself a good opportunity to really prove himself. So it's a win-win. He starts here. He makes a little less money. He gives himself a 1-year prove-it opportunity where he ideally can go back to the market next summer and make more. And the Suns get a player better than probably they ever thought they could, given that they were constrained because of the second apron to a minimum deal. So I was wrong that it wouldn't work out and make sense on both sides. It does, it will, and they got a very good player. So you absolutely have to do this signing once the opportunity materializes. This is their Gary Trent contract, right? I mean, I know a lot of Suns fans were kind of like, damn, how did the Bucks go out and get 3 guys, frankly, who might have had an opportunity to make more than the minimum? And then especially Gary Trent last week, DeLon Wright, and who's the other one? Taurean Prince before that. Gary Trent last week. What's going on? Why can't the Suns get their guy like that? They got Eric Gordon last year. That was kind of a good example. Well, they just did it, right? You wait long enough. As long as you're willing as a front office and a coaching staff to be amenable to good players who want to come, which clearly the Suns were, I don't think that they necessarily entered this offseason thinking that they were going to acquire a starting caliber point guard. But obviously, as the market for Jones on good teams with big roles sort of dissipated, his camp spoke with the Suns and said, hey, would you be open to what kind of role would our guy have here? And the Suns were flexible on that, and they're rewarded for it. So they get their Gary Trent the same way that the Bucks said, yeah, he'll start here. He's played with Dame. Let's make this happen. Now the Suns get their version of that.